All right, all right. Welcome, everybody. Good to see all of you today. I think I laid out enough, hopefully, that it stirred some of your observations and you've got questions or comments, preferably comments, because I think that a lot of us are familiar with some of these sources. I have read over the years various little snippets, but honestly, I never took the time to read through the annals of Sennacherib, and it was quite a fun time for me. I think that I enjoyed that, and I want to do more of that. So I'm looking around now, and a lot of these things that I've encountered in footnotes and other academic works are just, brief mentions that I've come across, and I say, oh, I know that exists out there. I really want to look at it. And one of the things that interest me right now, I mean, you can only get so good at so many things in life. I mean, how much can you possibly learn? And if you're like me and you sort of jump into all sorts of fields, you can spread yourself too thin. So I try to stay focused, especially when it comes to language studies. So, for instance, I'm not especially gifted at learning languages. That's never been an easy process for me. I've jokingly said before that I was the president of the French club in high school, but that was a popularity contest and not based on my linguistic prowess. So I was really, really bad at it. But I've loved biblical Hebrew. And so I've spent most of my time looking at biblical Hebrew and trying to get better at that. I'm not, a total expert at that either. But I can do a little bit in quite a few of these ancient languages. One thing I've never tried is Akkadian, which is the cuneiform. And one of the reasons that I'm leaning in that direction, in other words, I can't say, I can say without a vow. In other words, I'm not going to make any promises to anybody, but I have begun to read through some of the initial works, some of the baseline works for Akkadian, and I think what really convinced me to do that, I've been familiar. When I say Akkadian, I'm talking this cuneiform that we see in Babylonian text and everything. So, but there's so much out there. I mean, you can read it in English. There are good scholars who've already translated this. But anyway, so I'm going on and on and on to say that this is really a whole window to some good information, some good background to the Hebrew Bible and the stories that are contained in it. And even if somebody is not a person of faith, which I consider myself, and they're just interested in the Bible, if you really want to dig deep, this is one of the areas you can dig deep in. So, all right, I have decided to open it up and let some of you ask questions, provide comments, commentary. What'd you think about the three examples? What are some other examples archaeologically that have interested you? Primarily around, let's keep it focused on the Hebrew Bible, at least for this first part of the discussion. If we broaden it, archaeology is one of the sciences that we can appeal to when we study these things. Obviously, when I love inscriptions, and I've spent of the inscriptions that I've studied, Mesha is one that I've spent a lot of time on. Siloam inscription is one that I've spent more time on than, I don't know, between Mesha and Moab, those are two of the biggest that I've spent most of my time on. But there are quite a few others. Anybody else have any that they're interested in? Anybody? Nothing. Crickets. So how's everybody doing today? All right. Look at this. Boy, I'm going to wrap this up early and go play with grandkids. One thing that I did want to add, though, is I'm trying to put more links in the description of these videos because, for instance, I would highly, highly recommend that if you want something really good to watch, the video that the Armstrong Institute posted, it's an interview about this, I think it's called Slab 28 in the throne room of Sennacherib. I think that that is probably one of the most fascinating discussions. This young scholar tells how other great archaeologists and brilliant minds have looked at the drawings on this throne room and they've made certain observations, but none of them, actually, he does mention one guy and briefly in passing says that a particular scene, he proposed that it might be the siege on Jerusalem. But he didn't really give the why. You know, he didn't say, well, look, oh, there's a guy in a tower here. We think that this is, we think this might be Hezekiah. But what he does, he goes into, it's like a mural. It's an ancient way, like if you and I go on a trip and we take photos and we have a photo album. He just had more money than most of us had probably all together because Hezekiah's given him all the gold and silver you can possibly put in wagons. But nonetheless, it tells a story as you walk down the wall. And as I recall, one of the things that he points out is some of these are easy to identify. And if you compare the timeline with what we have in these Annals of Sennacherib, it puts you at the place where this particular wall has to be Hezekiah. So anyway, brilliant. Part of historical research is sort of like detective work. It really is in a lot of ways, because as you look down at those things, you've got to figure out what are these clues trying to tell us. And whenever we have the biblical account, which again, I think a lot of people who are minimalist or historical revisionists, they tend to dismiss the Bible, and I think that that's wrong. I think you should look at the biblical text, but you should be honest with the biblical text. Maybe there are things that are exaggerated. All of these ancient rulers, this is not something new. Modern day politicians and rulers are not the first to be braggadocious and, so forth. This has gone on forever. I'm going to pull up just for a moment. I'm going to look at the YouTube and make sure, in case there's anyone there that has any questions. Ranger Dave, good afternoon. Great deep dive into the rocks and stones. Very enlightening and thought-provoking. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. In fact, I know who you are. I don't give away people's little sidebars, but Karen, thank God. Hey, Karen, how you doing?
Good.
What you thinking today?
A quick question. So these Annals of Sennacherib found in Nineveh? Is that what you said in the?
Yeah, the first one is, and that's the title that we give it, but these prisms, they're called PRSISM.
Right.
But anyway, the first one was found in 1830 at Nineveh in what we call the armory, and then two others just showed up, right? And this is one of the biggest debates in modern archaeology. It's a little bit like we want to know the provenance. It's when you find it in a controlled archaeological setting, you go, I feel better about that, right? Because you're digging, you come up, you can look at other evidence and you can date it, and that way some dealer didn't do it. Now, the other two, one shows up that was in 1830. One just shows up in 1919. It was bought from an antiquities dealer in a market in Baghdad. That one is still considered authentic. Some scholars are really paranoid and they're scared to get their hands dirty on something that we don't. Where'd this guy get it? Did he make it? Is it fake? Yeah, they just don't want the hassle. But a lot of work has been done on this one. It's called the Oriental Institute Prism. And then a third one showed up and was purchased in 1970 by the Israel Museum. So we've got three of them. The interesting thing, sometimes they have 6 panels. Remember, the panels are about 5.5 inches wide, about
Yeah.
15 and about 15 inches, 15 inches tall. Some have 6 panels, some have 8. The reason they're different, we believe that some were produced earlier, and by the time the later ones were published, around 690 BC, they have all that Sennacherib had to brag about at that point. So
Would
earlier,
it
he
be
just had a few others, less.
would it be considered part of that library of Ashurbanipal that's found in Nineveh, or is this a different
I think it's a different
collection?
library, but you just bring up an excellent point. We have all of these other documents, inscriptions, tablets that are all written in cuneiform. I think what really drives me, I'll be 60 this year, and I hope to live to be 120 because Genesis tells me I can.
Mm.
So, but we never know, right? So, but for as long as I have, I want to try to, I guess my goal is to try to get where I can at least work in these languages so I can use the tools. Because the one thing I've learned from Bible study is that translators are the first traders, we say. Sometimes they're not so accurate.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I found it interesting. Sennacherib calls himself a shepherd pastor.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is a question mark on that particular piece of the translation. The reason I like the Annals of Sennacherib, this book that I found, the reason I like it is because it gives a transliteration of the Akkadian next to an English translation. And then in the back of the book, it actually has the cuneiform. So I'm one of those guys. I know you study a lot too. You go deep dive and rabbit trail too, Karen. I want to
Right.
say, how do I know that this guy translated this right? So now I look at my bookshelf and I say, you don't even have an Assyrian dictionary, Ross. So
Mhm.
what kind of Bible student are you? So I've got to get more tools and try to figure out because here's the thing I'm learning, Karen, these Babylonian texts, these Ugaritic texts, you and I, we've had conversations in the past about some of these texts from Northwest in the land of Israel, these texts that talk about Baal. I want to read those too, but you have to learn to read cuneiform, and I don't know the first grunt in
Well,
cuneiform yet.
there's translated copies of the cylinders found at Lagash that were written by that king Gudea.
Mm-hmm.
He also calls himself a shepherd king.
Oh, really?
Check and see if they're the same.
Oh, that's a good way to chase down a clue. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then it's almost like it's some kind of relatable archetype. Even in the Song of Psalms or Song of Songs, the author refers to the guy, as a shepherd king.
Right.
And the I think even Sargon might have had some kind of reference. They
Well,
try to present themselves as some kind of ruler who rules through duty and not just power.
right.
Like it makes them relatable to all men, not just the nobility and the priestly caste.
Well, and isn't it interesting whether you're dealing with the biblical account of shepherds and how they're considered in Israelite and Judite circles to be a very positive thing. Some of our great heroes and heroines are shepherds, right? From
Mm.
Moses to David. We have Rachel and, all these different stories about shepherd. But we also get the idea that in Egypt, shepherds, you don't say you're a shepherd. Why? Because of the shepherd kings. What is
Yeah.
that? What's all that about? I mean, there's a lot to dig into on the idea of the shepherd and the shepherd pastor. I'm going to have to dig into that too. I didn't have time to really do.
Maybe shepherd leader would be a better
Maybe
translation.
so. Maybe so. Yep. Yeah. It's intriguing, and I wanted to read today that passage I started with from the Annals of Sennacherib because I could almost imagine, like, I like watching boxing. I know some people don't, but I like watching a good fight. I'm
Mm.
a I'm a lover. I'm not a fighter. I don't like to fight, but I like to watch a good fight. And so sometimes when I was reading that, I was thinking of an announcer saying, "Here comes in the red trunks, the King of Kings, the Lord of the universe, the shepherd pastor," on and on and on, because it's just the most braggadocious thing you can ever see. But it was cool to see the different names he gave of himself anyway.
Mm.
I think the Israelites and the Judites probably had a different name for him that
Right.
they just didn't share.
No, anywho, that's all. So yeah, go look at the inscription from the Gudea of Lagash and see if it's the same because I think it's in cuneiform.
Good deal. I'll check it out. I appreciate you, Karen. Good to see you.
Bye.
All right. All right, Sue, how are you?
I'm doing okay. Thank you so much. It was a great lesson today, and I'm really looking forward to next week's now,
Yeah.
your teaser.
Hey, I like
um,
that background, by the way. It's got this
oh, yeah, thank you.
mystical. I like it.
Floaty's mic isn't working, but she has a question.
All
Her
right.
question is, Ross, are you of the opinion that archaeology and history up to this moment proved the Bible wrong or the other way around, mostly?
Yes, both. Both. I think what we have is we have evidence in some situations where history from outside sources and history in the Bible converge. But at the same time, we have differences, we have alternative facts. And I think that's to be expected. And the way I like to relate this when I talk to somebody about my field is and believe me, don't take this as a sign, let's jump into politics. That's not my intention. But let me just, without naming, if you watch your news on one channel and that's where you get your news, you're going to get a certain perspective about certain people and leaders and so forth. If you turn the channel, oh, they don't do knobs anymore, but if you turn the channel, you go to another channel and they're going to give you a totally different perspective so that
Mm.
you think that the guy they're talking about on channel A is Satan incarnate. And if you look at the other, he's just near to being the Messiah. Well, in ancient literature, why do we think they're different?
Right.
So I think that our best opportunity at getting at the truth is to ignore no source of data and let's just see if it maps out. Like I tell you, when I was reading the biblical story, the accounts from Sennacherib's palace on the prism, and having been to Lachish, that all agree. I mean, the evidence on the ground says they built a massive siege work. This was 2,700 years ago. I don't know if have you been to Lachish, Sue?
I don't believe I have.
It's one of my favorites. I know I see Sharon. I think maybe Sharon went to Lachish with us. I don't know. And you go to so many sites, you may not remember which one's which, but it you can see the siege work and it's there. It's like when you go to Masada and there's this massive siege work, and it's
Yeah.
built by soldiers who just keep bringing rocks and build and build and build until they just march up to the wall. And they suffer casualties, but when you have a lot of troops. So I know that's not a real definitive answer, but here's a case in point. When I read Mesha's account and I read the biblical account, in the biblical account in 2 Kings 3, they want us to understand that what led to the wrath of God and them ultimately leaving, it's almost like they put their hand on their head and they go, "Oh, you're not going to believe this. The king killed his own son on the wall."
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
I don't know if he did that. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. The Mesha Stela certainly doesn't say that he did that, but if it was something that he would consider to be efficacious, he might have said, "And I sacrificed little Johnny in order to gain the love and admiration of Chemosh." But anyway, so I think
yeah.
it takes. I have come to believe over the last couple of years that I'm more open to consider the stories from outside sources to help me round out the picture. And there's going to be
Exactly.
exaggeration on both sides. There just is.
You first pointed that out to me when you showed us that the chronicles are presented from different perspectives.
Yeah.
And that was a real door opener for me. Thank you very much for helping me grasp that concept, because like everybody else, I would read the one and then 6 months later read the other and
Yeah.
wouldn't see the contrast. So realizing between you and Barry Page, realizing that these books are being written from very different perspectives is a huge assist
It
in
is.
trying to ferret out what really happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, one of the biggest eye openers for me was, I up until 2018, I was your cookie cutter Bible believer. I had I think a Hebraic understanding. You too, huh?
Yeah,
But
pretty much.
when I started to look at the text and not dismiss the text, not make fun of or throw it out, but when I started
Right.
saying, "Well, hang on just a second. What's wrong with saying that we have different stories about the same event mentioned by different sources within our Bible?" This
Right.
book, I tell people all the time, this book changed my life. It changed my perspective when I realized that Kings and Chronicles or Samuel or Isaiah, Jeremiah, that sometimes they tell different stories, and you've got to look at it to get the rounded out picture. Like I almost expect now when I pick up the Bible, when I read Kings, or let's say Samuel and Kings, 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, I'm going to get a particular, not always, but I'm going to get a particular feel. And it's because
Right.
these documents are considered to have been written, at least in scholarly convention, by what we call the Deuteronomist. Yeah, it uses similar phrases. The same historian, it feels like the same historian is behind it. When I read Chronicles or Ezra, Nehemiah Chronicles, that is a priestly cult oriented perspective. Even Manasseh, like Kings tells us that Manasseh was the most wicked. They were blaming stuff that happened to Israel on Manasseh 100 years after he's dead and gone. That's how bad he was. It's like they're digging him up to spit on him.
Yeah.
And Chronicles says, yeah, he was a bad guy, but hang on, he confessed his sins and he got right with the Lord. And you're like, did he? Because 200 years after he's dead, they're still blaming bad stuff on him. The writer of Kings didn't think he ever made a repentance. But anyway, that's the kind of fun stuff I like to talk about and do these days anyway.
Thank you again. And
Hey,
Shavua Tov.
anything else, Sue?
Nope, that'll do me for now.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, hang around. If you get tired and get tired of sitting in the background, throw your hand up. Always like listening to you.
God bless.
God bless you. Sister Miriam, how you doing?
Well, shalom to all.
Shalom to you.
I have a question concerning Kings 18,
All right.
verse 3.
2
And he
Kings
said,
18:3. Hold on. Let me get there.
okay,
2 Kings 18:3. Almost there. All right, I'm ready.
yes, okay. We speaking of Hezekiah and his reign over Judah.
Yep.
Okay. And he said in verse 3, he did right in the sight of the Lord.
Yep.
And I think he was doing according to not just according to the Lord, but what he had thought or his preconceived notions at that time as to how to take care of things. And then here it is in verse 13, it says, 14. He said, I have done wrong. I have done wrong. Okay. So a king decrees things, right? If he decides something, then it doesn't change. And he has, whether it was wrong, good or bad. Right?
It's good to be king, they say.
Yes.
Well, let me say, first of all, the 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 1 through 5, a later writer is telling us how good Hezekiah was, right? So those are the words of the narrator. And I don't doubt those words. I think that according to the narrator, he was one of the righteous kings. He was very good. And we see that language. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Don't turn to the right or the left. That's very Deuteronomic. We see that not only there, but in fact, the writer of the history that we have in Kings in particular, there's a very methodical system that the writer uses. This one did right in the eyes of the Lord, like his father David. And he didn't do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and he didn't do according to the good deeds of his father David. We see that comparison with David over and over and over. So that's what the writer wants us to know is if you make a list of the good kings, bad kings, Hezekiah is one of the good guys. And at the time that was written, he was the best. Now, later, Josiah comes, and the same language is used for him, but even more so. So you can tell that that's written later because 2 Kings 18 says there wasn't one better than him before, nor did there rise one after. Well, Josiah came, it's his great-grandson, and Josiah was better than great-grandpappy. Now, when you get to verse 14 of 2 Kings 18, Miriam, that is the king, Hezekiah, supposedly. It's presented as what the king told Sennacherib. And he says to him, I've done wrong. Now, what we think that means is he's saying, I was wrong to not submit to your yoke. Because if you remember prior to that, it says, in fact, if you look at 2 Kings 18, one second, let me get there. I want to show you one thing that it says. Right after it says all of that good stuff about him, he did what was right as his father David had done. And then, if you look at verse 5, he trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so that there was none like him among all the kings of Judah after him, nor among those who were before him, for he held fast to the Lord, so forth. And then if you go down to verse 7, it says he rebelled against the king of Assyria and would not serve him. So when he tells Sennacherib, hey, I was wrong, the reason he's saying he's wrong is not that he's not admitting he's deviated from God's law, but he's saying, I should have bowed to your greatness earlier. You see the difference? That's what he's saying.
So Sennacherib has the authority over Hezekiah.
Because he's got him in a headlock. Yeah, he's got troops lined up outside the gate, and he's stomping his tail. So his authority comes through strength. And it's not like Isaiah is not telling him to submit. Later, when we get like to Jeremiah, Jeremiah brings a message from the Lord that they should submit to Babylon. And the rebellion against Babylon brings about the end of the First Temple period and the end of Judah. But he's just trying to save his skin is what he's doing. And he doesn't care what it cost. He just says, I was wrong. I should have bowed to you earlier. So what will it take? And he goes, about 30 talents of gold and, I don't know, 300 talents of silver, and go beat all that stuff off the wall too. I'd like all of it. If you could, and I'll take all your women and the harem, and that's what's going on there.
So Sennacherib has authority over what?
Everybody.
Country.
Everybody in the world at the time, because of his incredible, I say that, there are exceptions. He has some trouble in war against a Babylonian subject, and there are fights that he doesn't totally obliterate enemies, but when he makes his attack, he starts in the north and he beats them. Judah had called for Egypt to help, and they thought, we got Egypt's help. Well, Sennacherib beats the heck out of Egypt, and so he's on a roll. He's demonstrating ultimate power over these states and countries.
Oh, yes, okay.
Right. Anyway, that's what it looks like.
Now, you stated earlier, not to let you forget about this question about blood red water. Remind you.
Red water. You are my best friend for bringing that up. No one else get offended, but Miriam wins the award today.
Oh,
right,
my.
Miriam.
Okay.
All right, blood red water.
Gold score for me.
That's right. Put a gold star on your paper.
Yeah.
Now,
hey, yes.
Look, I tell you what we're going to do, Miriam. I'm going to tell our YouTube audience goodbye and thank you for joining us. And don't miss Sunday school next week. You don't know what I'm talking about. You know why I know that? Because I don't quite know yet. I've got some ideas. So have a blessed week, and I'm going to let you go, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Sunday school. All right.